productivity, quality, safety, and enhances the working condition. It helps us to save labor cost, life cycle cost, and so on. These are some of the historical technologies which developed through the history which enables construction automation. It started with in the 1100s, we had pulleys and levers, and later we came on to the down the line we had slip form construction, and several of which you are familiar with PERT and CPM while you study in class, all those in construction management courses. And one of another revolution is the CAD technology, which was very popular in 1980s, and we are building on that, and we have reached building information models which were initially gained popularity in 1990s, and we have reached the phase in which of we have machine learning and deep learning and Internet of Things drives the construction automation, which will enable us to create digital twins of the actual construction going on, and we can monitor the construction process in real time. So you can see machine learning is increasingly become the backbone of our construction automation. These are the degrees of industrialization. At the first level is prefabrication, where we create different parts of the structure in a factory setup and assemble it in the site. Next is the mechanization. We will use different machines to ease the effort of a labor. And automation is the stage in which the machines completely take over the work carried out by the human. And robotics is where we have machines which is capable of having multi-axle movements, and the same machine, robot can carry out different work. And reproduction is the stage where various research and development technologies are truly reached a stage in which we can ease the construction process. Currently, the world and different countries are in the various stages of automation, robotics, and reproduction. Let's move on to the difference between conventional construction and automated construction. This figure shows, the figure on your left-hand side shows the performance of the construction method over the time period. It follows the Foster's S-curve. You can see the conventional construction, when it started, it was growing really slow. Then gradually it picked up. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So initially it started, it was growing slowly. When we reached the 1970s, it was started increasing steadily. And now we have reached a plateau condition. So that that is when the construction automation starts. The current conventional construction has several shortcomings. That's where the construction automation comes and picks up. So you can see in the construction automation also follows a similar trend in the growth. But in the whenever we were introduced with a new technology, there is certain hesitancy among the people to adopt it. And construction industry is known for a late adopter. And all the various technologies, it will get so much time to introduce in an actual construction site. That is mainly because of the complexity involved in every construction process. As you can see in manufacturing process, if in a car manufacturing plant, we are repeating the same process over and over again. But unlike that, a construction is a unique project. Every construction poses different challenges. So adopting these technologies to construction takes some time. So all these single task construction robots, all these new technologies, it is harder to initially adopt. As it gains popularity and adoption, it improves further and it will reach the maturity. So these are some of the enablers for construction automation. One of that is robot-oriented design. You can see mostly all the developed countries, specifically Japan, is pioneer in automation and robotic technologies. So when we have robot-oriented design in the construction phase itself, it will incorporate this sophisticated machine in the various phases of construction. And in robotic industrialization phase, we have set all the design of the building components, and we can see with the sophisticated robotic machineries, we can build these components with the highest precision. And we also have construction robots. We have seen the single task construction robots, which specifically carry out an operation. For example, this particular robot fixes the window panes in this high-rise buildings. And this can also be used for painting the high-rise building. These are some of the challenging and dangerous tasks which we can replace the humans of all these kind of difficult conditions. Another situation is the site automation. This is also increasingly adopted in Japan. You can see one of the factory setup called SMART. This is nothing but we have a factory fully equipped with various construction systems in the real site. And you can see in the topmost portion shows a protected factory environment, and all the construction is happening inside it. As this particular operation unit is called the factory because it's something similar to the setup in the manufacturing unit. So this one repetitively carries out several complex tasks in this protected environment. As the building grows, this factory will be pushed upwards. There are other methods in which the centralized working unit will be placed in the ground level, and it will construct the structure from below and push it upwards. Next is the ambient robotics. Some of us are familiar with it. These are the technologies will help us to keep track of our health and fitness. Some of that is the smart chair, the gesture gaming, and our Fitbit. All those technologies will be later adopted into construction side for making it better. For example, our Fitbit and tracking devices consist of various sensors, which will help us to track the the health conditions of the labor. Moving on to our automated construction system at IIT Madras, we have developed an automated construction system for low-rise building construction. You can see it in the figure. The orange color one is the automated construction system. The dark metallic color one is the structural frame. This is the full size ACS, which is for the demonstration purpose, a small scale structure is constructed in a laboratory environment. And this follows the similar principles of factory setup we have seen in situ factory setup, where it follows the top-down construction method. Here, the entire construction unit will be in the ground floor. And once the topmost portion of the structure is completed, it is pushed upwards periodically. So as we have seen in the principles of robot-oriented design, the structure is modularized into components so that it supports the automated construction. Here you can see the structural frame is divided into certain modules of standard size and which is supported on different supporting platforms. And in this case, we have 6 columns and some of that are not visible, and every stages of it, this design is made in such a way that every stages of the construction, the structure will be stable. Let me play the video. So you can see it while the structure is completely supported, one of the support moves down and we can assemble another module of the column to the previously connected structural component. And the support will be raised again to take the load. So you can see here clearly as the support lowers, we can connect one more module. Once it is completed, it will be lifted upwards till it takes the load. It will be repeated for the all positions of column. So we have seen lowering of support, connection of column module, lifting of support until it takes load, and another one, it is repeated for all the structure, all the supports. These are some of the main operations. Then this is called coordinated lifting. And this comprises one cycle of operation. As you can see, there are major construction operation involved in a cycle. My request to you everyone to mute, please. So these are some of the prototypes of automated construction system. The ACS prototype 1 is the earlier prototype where we tested the principles of top-down construction. And the next advanced version of this prototype was using hydraulic setup, and we had heavier construction modules. So every stage of construction, we have incrementally improved the automated construction process. So this is ACS prototype 3 is the one we have currently seen. And the last one is ACS prototype 4. We have, and in this ACS prototype 3, we have a cycle time of 15 minutes. That means to carry out one stage of construction, that is one layer of it, one module of this construction or this structural frame requires 15 minutes to complete. So we have reached a prototype where we will take less than 2 minutes to complete the one cycle of the structural frame. So you have already seen what is machine learning. And machine learning is, as you know, we are teaching the machines what comes something naturally to us. We learn from experience. From childhood onwards, we learn from different experience what to do, what not to do. Here, in case of machine learning, this experience is nothing but data. With data, the algorithm is learning to do certain tasks. So unlike normal physics-based methods, we don't have a predetermined equation as model. So it will dynamically learn from the given data. So these algorithms adaptively improve their performance as the number of data samples increases. So you have already seen what is unsupervised learning, and it consists of clustering. So you just have seen in the last session. And supervised learning, we have classification and regression problems. So in classification problem is the one we are going to see further. So these are some of the machine learning algorithms. You will see all these algorithms in detail. So I'll just give a brief of that. So you have seen, you will come to see what is k nearest neighbor. So all these algorithms are based on certain principles to classify the given set of data into different classes. For example, we have here the one circle here, and we have several points surrounding it. Sorry, I'll just, I think, could you just mute yourself? I can see someone's audio. I can hear somebody's audio, sorry. So in k nearest neighbor method, the classification is done in in an assumption that all the data points which has of similar characteristics lie together. So we classify a certain data point based on the characteristics of the neighbor. If you can see, so we will use certain distance matrices to determine which class a particular data point belongs to. Next is the decision tree. Decision tree, where in decision tree we will use certain rules of predictors to determine which class it belongs to. You will also see these things in detail. Now you can see that these are some rule-based methods. Then support vector machine. In support vector machines, you can we will use a hyperplane or boundary to separate different classes. The boundaries are determined in such a way that which gives maximum separation between the nearest classes, nearest data points to it. And another algorithm is discriminant analysis. Here we'll create the classifier based on a linear combination of all the features. So all this term you will come to know in detail, and here we'll assume that different classes generate data based on certain Gaussian distribution. So we are trying to find out these Gaussian parameters to see which class a particular data point belongs to. Naive Bayes uses the probability to determine the class label. And this is neural network that all of you are familiar with it. That's the most popular method right now. And it is inspired by human brain. So this initial input classes will be mapped to these output classes based on certain relationship. This relationship are learned by this intermediate neurons in this layer based on iterative learning. So coming on to the application of machine learning and construction automation. So you have seen that we are using machines for construction. As you can imagine, machines, they might not have an intelligence of its own to find out whether the construction and activity is going on perfectly. If something is wrong, how do it take decision? It cannot. So it will be programmed to do certain tasks in certain conditions. But as human operator, if imagine you are a human operator sitting in a remote location and you are carrying out this automated, you are just watching the automated construction task going on. Unlike the normal construction, automated construction is really fast. So if something goes wrong, if we didn't catch it in the moment it starts going wrong, it will escalate quickly and end up in a major catastrophic accident. So we need to find out if something goes wrong early enough. That's why we use sensors. We will place several sensors in the different structures and equipment, and we will get some signals like this. So from the operator's cabin, we will get certain signals like this. So ideally, we will imagine if the operation is going safe, this looks something like this. And if it's unsafe, it goes haywire or something like this. So it is easy, right? We can just see and take decision. But in actual scenario, construction is really complex. We just don't have 2-3 sensors. We have several sensor data. We will be bombarded with information. So if we want to take quick decision, how do we take the decision? Just by seeing this data, it is impossible to do that. That's why we need certain techniques to interpret what is exactly going on. That's where machine learning comes into picture. So for example, this is our automated construction system. And these are certain sensors. We have placed strain gauges and accelerometers on key locations of the structure. And during the automated construction process, we'll get this sensor data. Accelerometer gives us the acceleration information. This is something roughly like the vibration data from the structure. And strain gauges, as you see, we will get the strain data. So with this, what we are going to do. So this is the methodology for
Madam,
automation.
I have one question. Since you have show us the demo also, you have placed the things in the closed loop, in the closed environment. What are the challenges? Because construction is not like in the closed environment, in the closed loop. I hope that you agree with my point. It is there in the open environment, right? So
Yes,
maybe the sensors has a challenge. Maybe the workability has a challenge. Maybe the data reading is a challenge, because getting a noise with the data is itself a challenge if we work in the open environment. So what is your comment in that sense?
Samir, I will take the questions in the end once you get the full picture. Is that okay? Yeah. So what we were saying, we need to monitor the automated construction process. So before we are going to check whether any of the operation is going wrong, we need to see if all the operations are going on right. We need to identify that. For that, we need to identify each and every operations of this automated construction system with the finest level of details. If it's going perfectly, then we can move on the condition where if something goes wrong. So there comes the activity recognition problem. We need to see what are the activities going on. So that how it is done. So first, we have an automated modular construction, as you have seen. Then we will collect the sensor data from different parts of the structure. Then we process the data so that it will help us supervised learning. So all the data will be in the raw form. We have to extract certain useful information, clean the data that involves in the data pre-processing part. Then comes the supervised learning. We will label the data and train it with certain examples, and later we will test to see whether the machine learning model has correctly identified. That's how we comes to the operation recognition part. So in conventional approach, we have 4 recognition levels. You can see RL 1 to 4. The first level, we will try to see whether it is an ideal condition or the operation is going on. In the second level, we will see what are the main operations in that. In the third level, we will see what are the sub-operations in that. In the fourth level, we will see what are the construction stages based on the cycle. Why is it important to know this many details about an automated construction? Because if something is going wrong, then we need to take quick actions. So we need to have all the information of the operation correctly going on. If some of the support is not properly taking the load, and we are getting an alert that we need to take immediate action. At that time, we need to know which support has the issue and which activity was carrying on just before that, and which sub activity was carrying on, so that we can take quick actions based on even from a remote location. That is why we need more information about different stages of construction. So how do we do that? We have the sensor data. We'll give it to a machine learning classifier. It can use any of the learning algorithm like KNN, artificial neural network, SVM, any of it. So we'll supply it into this machine learning classifier and train it, and it will identify different operation classes, and whether it is idle or operation 1.1 and several different classes. So this is what happening in each of these levels. Each of this level, we have one classifier, which is designated as CF1 to 4. So each of this classifier will be handling one identification problem. In the recognition level 1, we have 2 classes, whether it is idle or operation. Here we have more classes. In the current case, we have idle plus all the major operations like coordinated lifting, connection of module, lowering of support, lifting of support, all of it. So we have 5 major operation classes. And RL3, we have sub-operations like coordinated lifting and if connection of column module, which support the connection is happening. If lowering of support, which support it is happening. We will divide it into subclasses. So in our particular example, we have 6 supports. So we have totally around 25 cases in the RL3. In RL4, we will mark each of the operation with the designation of the cycle, which construction stage it is, whether it is level 0, level 1, 2, etc. So we have around, in the current example, we have carried out 2 cycles of operation. So we have totally 51 operation classes. As you can see, we are moving from recognition level 1 to 4. The number of cases increases drastically. You can imagine the complexity of the problem also increases. So these are the features we have used. What are features? So you have seen we will get certain data of strain and acceleration. These are just raw data in the form of certain signals. So if we need the machine to learn it correctly, we need to give it in the useful way. So features are some kind of characteristics of the data that will help the learning algorithm to find the mapping between the input and output. So, if we given with the peak, so if the signal has certain peak, we will designate that if the peak occurs at this much magnitude, it might belongs to coordinated lifting, or it might belongs to ideal condition. So peak, interquartile range, variance, these are some of the time domain features, the statistics extracted from the data. And there are other complex frequency domain features like signal energy, signal period, like FFT, frequencies, all these values are some of the features will we use for supervised learning. And these are the classifiers used. 6 different classifiers were used for our particular problem. So finally, to the results. So this graph shows the accuracy of prediction in each cases and what's the performance with the different classifiers. This accuracy of predictions means we have divided the training, we have divided the data we have obtained into training and testing cases. So in training phase, we will give with some examples and with the algorithm will learn from it. And the testing phase, we will give it with a new set of data, which has it never seen before. So if it performs well, then it shows that the particular classifier has learned well. It learned to identify the pattern between the different operation classes. So accuracy shows how much accurate each of the predictions were. So you can see KNN and all other algorithms, as the complexity of problem increases, the same set of number of data points, the performance decreases. And all you can see, the KNN is based on the distance between this particular data classes, data points. If the operations are belong to a same class, it will, so if a particular data point is classified based on its nearest neighbors, so it is looking for some kind of distance relationship, but it doesn't work when the complexity of problem increases. Decision tree uses certain kind of rule to see. So if the if the mean value is a particular value, it belongs to this class. Like that, it actually tries to find out a rule-based method. So this also works fine in the initial stage to identify whether it is operation or idle. As you can see, the first stage, when all the algorithms performs well, it can identify whether it's idle or operation. But when it comes to more complex operations, the performance drops. Like SVM was trying to find out a hyperplane or a discriminant which separates two classes. So each of these algorithms performance drops drastically. But in case of neural network, it actually the performance did not drop as drastically as you can see in the all different methods. Here, the neurons are trained repetitively with various examples, and the strength of the relationship between this input and output data is improved with each iterations. So you can see neural network has a pretty good performance compared to all other methods. To summarize, so each classification level, this is how the overall accuracy varies. So conclusions. So we need to take the type of data.
Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt, but I think here I need to verify something. Ma'am, you just said complexity, and according to your definition, complexity means the number of labels we have.
In this particular context, number of classes, yes.
But it's always the case or not? It's like, is it complex? Is complexity related to number of labels only?
No, complexity has different meanings in different domains. In this particular example, I'm talking about the number of cases involved in a particular classification.
Okay, thank you.
Are you clear?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have seen that we have to carefully select the data to identify certain classes. In this specific example, our machine has a predominant vibration during operation. So we have picked up acceleration for identifying the different classes. And we have seen that even though there are different complex classifiers or large amount of data, it not necessarily deliver better results. So we need to pick the classifier carefully. So among all the 6 machine learning classifiers, neural network give the best results. And surprisingly, this neural network is a shallow network that it has only one layer and less than 10 neurons, but it's still able to map the input-output relationship. So the complexity of irrespective of the complexity, how we actually pose the problem, train the data, pick the features, everything matters more just than the more complex algorithm. And we have seen in most cases, neural network has achieved close to 100% accuracy. So these are all these work are published in various literature. You can see it in the reference. So thank you. Earlier, I forgot the name, sorry. Somebody asked about the complexity conditions, right? And the site. So yes, I agree with that. Inside that situation will be much more disruptive. But when we test a new technology, we cannot directly launch it into a situation which is uncontrollable. Think about it. Most of the cases you can see, every earlier prototype of any technology was tested in a controlled environment. Because if we are testing it in an uncontrolled environment, we may not see which went wrong. Inside, there will be problems with the dust, uncertainties, and so much occlusions. The people moving around, they might disrupt many of these things. So if we wanted to develop a technology, first we need to try and perfect it in the controlled environment. Once it is reached a maturity level, we can improve and implement it into actual construction stage. And this particular example, we have developed it in the controlled environment, but we can still install it in the site. In that specific condition, certain things has to be changed. The sensors has to be changed, and it has to be protected from the harsh weather condition. But initially, we don't need all those interruptions. So testing stage, we will do it in the controlled environment. Then later we improve and implement it into actual state.
I guess something is wrong with your audio, ma'am. It's breaking in between.
Sorry, where did you lose me? Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, audio is
No, ma'am, it's not.
Actually,
No good.
Actually, it's fine.
Audio is clear.
issue for us.
And it varies with
That's
the, if your connection has some problem, then also you may not hear clearly. I think most of you have clear audio. Is there any other?
Audio is fine.
Yes, we hear you. Yes.
Okay.
can
Is
hear
there
you
any other
clearly.
question?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Here you use the sensors data to train our model. So is there any possibility that we will use the image recognition system?
Yes. Nikunj, right? Nikunj, you're asked an interesting question. So we were talking about data, right? This sensor data is a kind of data, like acceleration is a kind of data, image is another kind of data. So based on, so we can use any kind of data for recognition, but not for all purposes. So in this particular purpose, you can say the machine has predominantly vibration. So the best method to recognize the activity is through acceleration, to checking the vibrations. So it has the vibration patterns, a signature vibration pattern for most of the operation. So acceleration will be a better option. So in case of certain other case operations, for example, if you need to detect, for example, if you wanted to see the laborers are wearing PPE correctly or not, I cannot use a body bound sensor for that. I need to use pictures, because pictures only will help us to determine whether he is wearing a hat or a reflector, all those things. So pictures give me information related to that. In those kind of problems, we will use images as recognition. So we will use slightly more sophisticated machine learning classifiers for that. So it's again depends on what kind of problem we have. And pictures doesn't mean that it will always give good results. I have seen, if you look at many of the latest publication in activity recognition, people has used images to classify the activities of construction laborers, and they have used body-bound sensors like accelerometer, gyroscope to find out. Surprisingly, sometimes the sensor data like we collected might give even better results. So it's purely depends on what problem you have.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
I would like to
Oh.
know what are the softwares you have used to integrate both the hardware and the data that you collected and for prediction purposes also, software or frameworks?
So we have used several softwares. For example, we have used Arduino microcontrollers for controlling various operations of this particular automated construction system. For data collection, we have used HBM data acquisition system. And we have certain software inbound for HBM called Catman. It might not be that popular in student community. It is commercial software which collects the sensor data, and it was later imported into MATLAB. So I have used MATLAB, VB, and Python for machine learning analysis. So most of the time what happens was, as a newbie interested in machine learning, we'll mostly focus on, the software programming language. It will be quite, overwhelming. So my advice is you first learn the principles well, you understand what are the concepts, then you take a comfortable programming environment. It can be Python, MATLAB, or anything. Then start with that. Learn enough, have enough experience in a particular language, then you move on to explore other. If you start with all, you will get confused. Yeah.
Ma'am, even I have a question.
Yes.
Compared to MATLAB and Python, which would you prefer as a newbie to pursue a project in it?
So it again, it is personal, because I started working with MATLAB for a long time. I was really comfortable. So I find it easier. But it again, if you are a new person learning from scratch, Python might be easier for you, but it's somewhat intuitive. Many of these things. But again, if you're working in a coding intense way, or you, in that case, Python will be much more suitable for you. But if you're working in a research environment, especially, we need to use so many complex functions. MATLAB has you already know that MATLAB has so many useful inbuilt libraries for signal processing, many other things. So in one platform itself, we can import so many functions. But in case of Python, you need to have so many libraries, you need to be familiar with that. Sometimes it will be overwhelming when you start. So we might not know all how to use certain libraries when you start. But in MATLAB, you have inbuilt function for that. Once you start learning it, it will be easier. So again, I will advise you start with pick one, explore it further, then you go on to something else. It again, a personal choice.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
No worries.
Yeah.
I have a doubt actually.
Yes.
You are telling about features like time, working in time domain and also in frequency domain.
Shanmugh, sorry, I cannot hear you clearly.
Sorry, one second.
Sorry. Hello.
There is one question in the chat. Is it possible to combine algorithms like ANN decision tree to form a classifier? Yes, it is possible. A lot of people have used hybrid algorithms. So that is that's also another idea which a lot of people have already tried. Are there any more questions?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
This is Shanmugh.
Yes. Yes, Shanmugh.
Yeah, you told you worked on time series, time domain and also in frequency domain in features. So
yes.
Could you please explain about it? Like you converted the time series data into frequency domain using any transformation?
Yes. So our data is vibration, right? Which spans from the beginning to end of the program. So it is a continuous signal. So in the time series as we obtain. But as you can see, vibration, certain signature of a vibration data cannot be obtained from just statistical features. So we have used FFT, fast Fourier transform, to convert it into frequency domain. There we can get a much more useful information about what is the most predominant frequency, how the energy spectra goes. All those information we can extract from the frequency domain. FFT is the one we use.
Yeah, fast Fourier transform, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So
Okay. And which features give like a maximum classification accuracy?
It's like there are several, I would say several combination of features. And in this case, we have 8 sensors and 10 unique features. So we had totally 80 features. It's a really high dimensional space. So I have observed that frequency domain information were one of the major deciding factor, and also peak was one of the characteristic discriminant, a particular feature which helped us to classify. But again, when we used in combination, it gave much better results. So, yeah.
Ma'am,
Okay,
you
thank you
said
very much.
80, but we have 8 sensors, right? From 8 sensors, how the features became 80?
So we initially I showed you, right, 5 time domain features and 5 frequency domain features. So we have totally 10 unique features. From each sensor location, we will take these 10 features. So we have 8 sensors. So you have seen different parts of the structure. We have one sensor. So each sensor 10 features. 8 into 10, 80. I think I answered your question.
There's a question in the idle, non-idle conditions. So I think what he means is probably, is it idle or ideal? Probably it is, these faults and normal conditions and faulty conditions. Maybe we can talk about both.
Can you talk about non-ideal condition that you can go through? Ideal is the one where the machine is turned on and no activity is carried out. So when the operation is carried out, we can't say no and ideal. It is classified as ideal or operation state. Ideal means machine is turned on but no operation is going on, and rest all are the operation categories. I think that's what you meant. And there are some questions. I'll quickly take that. How does ACS actually work? Does it deal with the concrete tube? Can this be considered as its future scope? So you can see we are using lifting machines, right? So as we currently know, we are not using concrete because concrete is really heavy. You can say when we use a huge weight to lift, we need higher power. So when we need higher power for lifting, the cost also increase. In this case, the structural frame we use steel. It has enough strength and it has the flexibility to make it into different modules. The problem you can see in prefabricated construction, concrete is used for using heavy fork and kind of idea. Kind of machinery, but our idea is to use light machines, so we stick with the steel. Is it possible to combine algorithm? Yeah, that is already answered.
I would like to add on to this question which you just answered.
Okay.
How does, when you told about lifting machines, right? So how does it actually lift, and what kind of motors are this you use? You either pull it from the top, or do you push it from the bottom?
We will push it from the bottom. So we have a certain stepper motors. So it's designed. I think I don't have the picture right now. So it is like each of the machines you are seeing in the orange color. It has a worm screw kind of gears, and we have a threaded rod behind. So the lifting platform is attached to that. So once the motor operates, the platform goes steadily on this threaded road and it lifts it up. So design is much more complex. I think some of the references you can find more details in our literature.
Yeah, we have different versions. We had 4 different prototypes. So the initial one, we just used a hoist for lifting. Then later on, we used another one which involved hydraulics, the hydraulic jacks for lifting. The one which you saw, the video which you saw today, it uses hybrid stepper servo motors. And then, so this has some gears which will transmit the power to guide rods, threaded rods which are used for lifting. So we used different types of mechanisms for different prototypes. But the one which we finally use is the one using stepper motors. That works quite reliably. That's the latest one we are using. But hydraulic system is also very reliable.
I will post the link to these publications. If you are interested, you can go more detailed into each of these techniques we have discussed here.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
can you please also tell what is the lifting capacity which you have designed for? Like,
lifting capacity is 2 tons per machine. It's really compact but powerful. So we intended to use it for commercial purpose. We have tested it in a specific constraint thing, but we still can use it in commercial purpose with really high weight. The 2 ton is the lifting capacity for machine. So what to clarify, the experiment was supervised or unsupervised? Okay, want to clarify the experiment was supervised or unsupervised. So you have seen it is a supervised learning. We will give the examples with the labels for training, and then the algorithm will learn from that. So it is supervised learning. And you don't need to worry. Professor Benny will take you to more in-depth details into each of these classification algorithms. In ACS, we use algorithms to predict the next move of the system. So if the prediction rate of algorithm is not 100%, can we risk it to be applied on site? So that's why my current research is focusing on to improve the accuracy, the performance of identification. You are rightly pointed out, because we are using it for the purpose of safety. So we need to highly accurately identify the activities correctly, so that it might not result in a severe accidents or something. I'm currently working on that. You can see more publication in the future. In ACS, we use algorithm. Okay, that's all, I guess. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one question either for you or maybe Professor Benny can also respond. Okay. We have seen not exactly the same ACS kind of system that you have developed, but there are other systems which are developed in Japan and Korea and so on and so forth. Okay, such as SMART or Amrud and so on. Okay.
Yes.
My question is why it has not succeeded commercially. I mean, rather I would say not only just in India but globally also. Okay, it has not succeeded beyond certain point. At one point in time, as I think Professor Benny has mentioned, that the Japanese were pouring tremendous amount of money in construction automation also. Okay, but it seems that has stopped or it has gone down, something like that. So maybe I would like to have comment either both from you or maybe Professor Benny can better.
So can I answer the question, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you have seen the initial implementation is highly costly and it takes a lot of technological background. In case of Japan, the community itself is different. They have sophisticated robots in every level, even in healthcare, many other sectors, because they are falling short of young population. It is their need. So it is the need to automate the construction, and even if it's expensive, they are pushing it forward. When it comes to India and all other countries, when we have labor which we will get cheap human labor, it is difficult to convince people to invest in a futuristic technology and follow it, so that somewhere down the line 20 years you will get a much more better quality. It is hard to convince them. That's why we are in the initial phase. It cannot just carry out itself. We need so many different technologies associated with it. So initial investment cost is high. That's one thing. The expertise required to carry out and teach people to a specific technology and train them so that they can use it. All these things are some of the major barriers. And but still you can see it is getting picked up, and in the future maybe we can see that. Sir, you want to add something?
Yeah, in general, our construction industry is very conservative. We like to do things the way we are most comfortable with. We don't want to make any change to our procedures because there are a lot of risks associated with it. So I think this conservative mentality is one big barrier to the adoption of more innovative things. We need people who are willing to experiment and take the risk. That's why all these startups which I showed yesterday, these are important because they have nothing to worry about. If they succeed, it becomes really successful. So these these bricklaying robots, and we also work with some other startups who are making machines which can do the plastering, painting, and all that with the robot. So these are the people who are likely to change the industry, because if you leave it to traditional companies, they like to do the way they are comfortable with. So that is the biggest barrier. But I would say, you will see a lot of changes in the near future, because robotics is catching up in all the manufacturing industry. And once people see the potential for that in construction, especially in prefabricated construction, it's going to get adopted. So if the traditional companies are not going to do it, there will be new companies, just like Google and all these IT companies came and completely transformed the industry. This revolution is going to happen even in the construction industry. So if traditional companies are not going to do it, they are going to be left behind. Some other Google is going to come in the construction sector.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you, Aparna. It was really interesting to see some practical applications of machine learning. So we will continue with the lecture. Let me share my screen.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we will continue. We were discussing about the equipment productivity. We have 114 responses so far. Okay, those who have not submitted the form during the break, you can go back and submit all the forms. These are simple exercises, but you learn quite a lot by doing it, by thinking about the problem. And so complete it during the break. We have quite long breaks during the lunch break, as well as in between the sessions. So you have enough time, so you can work on it. So let me look at your responses. So most of you have seen more than 3 clusters. Let me go back. Okay, so this is the picture. A lot of you have seen many clusters. In fact, just like the previous exercise we did, there's no correct answer. Depending on your perspective, you can see any number of clusters. What are the characteristic features of each cluster? So one person thinks there are two different contractors who have different productivity. So that is a very good answer. So these clusters could represent different contractors. In fact, it's not two different contractors. It is maybe probably two different types of contractors. There are different contractors having different levels of productivity. Contractors with high productivity, contractors with low productivity. It's not two contractors. I know because we know what this data is. There are multiple contractors. I think there are something like 5 or 10 different contractors. And there are also, yes, this is good. In initial days, excavation higher, so it also depends. It's not just the productivity. Some contractors were lucky. They had some terrains which were really good. So they are able to they work on certain sectors where they can improve the productivity. So, and also there are weather conditions. So there are certain days where the productivity is high. Yeah, so there is a temperature, there are a lot of parameters which affect the production. So some days are affected by these environmental factors which affect the productivity. Yeah, so this is good. The same idea which we explained just now, efficient contractor and not so efficient contractors. So it is good that you were able to look at all the clusters and try to identify some reasons for the formation of clusters in the data. So I have my next slide in which my interpretation of the clusters. So there are multiple clusters. So I have shown 4 plus 3, 7 clusters. Depending on how you look at it, you can see more. By putting these circles, I'm biasing your view of this. So you might be able to see 7 or even more, depending on how you look at it. So these are some of the clusters which I have identified. But you can see, there's an idea of a hierarchical hierarchy of clusters. So as somebody said, there are the contractors with low productivity and there are contractors with high productivity, which is quite visible from this. You have this top cluster and the bottom one, mainly based on the productivity with high productivity and low productivity. And then there are clusters based on individual days. There are some days where people have similar productivity, maybe influenced by the weather conditions. And within these, you will see that even in even among high productivity contractors, you have different clusters based on the days. Probably these are days affected by the weather. So you can see there are many clusters. So this is the illustration of what we can use clustering for. You get some information about the distribution of points, but once we go deeper into the clusters using domain expertise, we will be able to find out some meaning for these clusters which the machines can do. Machines cannot automatically tell you why these clusters are there, but domain experts can look into it and will be able to find out more information about it. So we have seen supervised learning, we have seen unsupervised learning, and now we look at the next one, which is reinforcement learning, which is also very highly specialized area. So we won't go so much deep into it, but I just want to give you some idea about what exactly is reinforcement learning. So to compare with what we have already seen in supervised learning, we have input variables and output variables, and the learning objective is to find the relationship between the input and output. In unsupervised learning, we just want to find some characteristics of the data, trends and patterns in the data. So that's the purpose of unsupervised learning. In reinforcement learning, we learn a procedure for performing some task. You want to find a sequence of actions. You want to identify the optimal sequence of action. And this we learn through feedback in the form of penalties and rewards. So in setting up the problem, you need to define the rewards function and the simulation environment. We are continuing till 12:15. We already had a break at 10:40. I don't know, remember, I'll check in. I think we will just continue for another 15 more minutes, and then we will have a longer break. So in reinforcement learning, we want to identify a sequence of action. For an example, as in if you want to play chess, it's not just yes and no kind of thing like a supervised classification problem, but we want to learn a sequence of action. It's not one action which is going to determine whether you win or lose. It's a sequence of action. The same thing in robotics. We need to select a sequence of control actions. Autonomous driving is another example. So these are, I'll take one example where we can use this. So let us look at this 3D printing example. I'll first show the video of the 3D printer we have developed in association with the startup company incubated in our research park called Swasta, which developed the first concrete 3D printer in India. So I'm just going to play this video to give you some idea about how a concrete 3D printer works. Okay, that video, it is played very fast, so you can't really see how the 3D.
Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
So I'll show another video where you can see the process more clearly. This is the video. This is from Netherlands. There are a lot of groups all around the world